and undeniable and lethal threat including to Canada Australia and its people. The world has tried for years other means, but so far to no avail. We cannot walk away from the threat that Iraq's continued possession of weapons of mass destruction constitutes to its region and to the wider world. In the final analysis, Mr. Speaker, the absolute conviction of the government is that disarming Iraq is necessary for the long-term security of the world and is therefore manifestly in the national interest of Australia.
In the final analysis, disarming Iraq is necessary for the long-term security of the world, to the collective interests of our historic allies, and therefore, manifestly, Mr. Speaker, it is in the national interest of this country.
So let me ask you this. Why have you never heard about this speech? Why have you never seen this on the 6 o'clock news? Why didn't you read about this in the newspapers? You would think instead of Rob Ford dropping F-bombs that this would be a little bit more important. Our elected representative at the highest level parroting a speech without a care in the world from the Australian Prime Minister. Why did this happen? Who controls Stephen Harper's puppet strings? You may never have heard of this because, according to Mel Hertig, we have one of the most concentrated medias in the entire world. 20 years ago, 40% of our media in Canada was independently owned. Today, it is less than 1% independently owned. About 3 or 4 major companies control every newspaper. They control every news website. They control every news station and every news broadcast on television. They control the newspaper articles. And they all meet together in a club called the CCCE. You can go to their own website and check it out. But here's a short list of some of the people that get together who are friends with each other. They make decisions together. They belong to a club called the CCCE, the Canadian Council of Chief Executives. Number 1, Ian Greenberg, President and CEO of Astral Media, is buddies with Ronald N. Stern, President and CEO of Alberta Newsprint Company. And then there's George Cope, President and CEO of Bell Canada and BCE Incorporated. And they hang out and have champagne with a guy named Bill Buckley, President and CEO of Shaw Corporation Limited. And they're buddies with Paul Desmarais Jr., Chairman and CEO of Power Corporation Canada, responsible for the Montreal Journal, La Presse Montreal, Le Sun Quebec, the Sherbrooke Tribune, and the list goes on and on. I could go on for another hour talking about all the big media moguls who get together in this private club, hanging out with big pharma executives, hanging out with big oil executives. All these guys are friends with each other. They're not going to stab each other in the back. They're not going to show stuff that damages their own reputation. Now, an astute listener may ask yourself, well, how do I, Fat Cat, know this? Well, they have a website. You can go to it too. It's ceocouncil.ca. It's not well publicized, but why would it be? So, what I want to explain to you now is the CCCE has an incredible amount of power in terms of what happens in this country. For example, a few months ago, back in April, they wrote a nice letter directly to Stephen Harper, our Prime Minister. Said, hey Steve, we have some gentle suggestions that we want you to do. So number 1 is China. In this letter, please Stephen, go to China and help us enhance and increase the viability of Chinese-Canadian trade relations, because it will obviously benefit us. And funny, but the Globe and Mail reported a few months later in August 2011, again less than 3 months later, that this letter was written to Stephen, It said, quote, Stephen will make his second visit to China in November to set a new tone for political and economic ties with Beijing. So Stephen Harper, CCCE, told him to go to China, enhance trade relations. A couple months later, he does it. Who is pulling this guy's puppet strings? What else did it say in the letter, too? The CCCE's letter to Stephen said, hey, Steve, enhance and increase Japanese trade agreements. In other words, enhance and increase the Doha Developmental Agenda. It's an International Monetary Fund trade agreement based out of Japan. What does Stephen do? On October 18th, just not too long ago, the Globe and Mail had a quote from Canada's Trade Minister, Ed Fast. He said, Canada certainly isn't going to give up on the Doha Roundtable. And we as the Canadian government are going to be more and more aggressive pursuing this agenda to develop and implement the Doha Development Trade Agenda at the behest, of course, of the CCCE. It doesn't stop there. Number 3, the CCCE's letter recommended gently, of course, to Stephen Harper, our elected leader, that we should have new copyright laws imposed, and that in effect, Stephen, please modernize the Copyright Act in Canada. Funny, but Yahoo News reported a few weeks ago that the Harper government is now about to reintroduce its copyright bill. September 29th, 2011, Bill C-32, actually called the Copyright Modernization Act. From Yahoo News, just a few days ago, Industry Minister Christian Paradis said, quote, Canadians will soon have modern copyright laws that promote innovation. Innovation like allowing pharmaceutical companies to put trademarks on spider goats and cancer mice and growing ears on the backs of animals and bulletproof skin, and they want to copyright this stuff. They belong to the CCCE. They control the media. They send a letter to our elected official. They pull his puppet strings, and he does exactly what they want. I could go on, but those are 3 examples. Read for yourself. Go to their own website. Puppet strings of Stephen Harper.
News you think is fake, but is actually real.
Truth is indeed stranger than fiction, my children. I like this section. I look for news all the time that is stranger than fiction. Truth is stranger than fiction. Check this out. From Georgia, they're actually considering using prisoners as firefighters to put out fires because they're running out of money, because most of their money goes towards paying off debt to private banks. Just like in Toronto, not too many people know this. Gee, I wonder why. But 1, the number 1 expense is police of the city of Toronto. Most cities are like this. 2, transportation. And 3, drumroll please, the most expensive cost incurred by our city is debt. When debt becomes number 1, like it has in many other places, you can't pay for civil services. Who needs fire departments when you can have prisoners come to your house and put out fires for you? You're going to trust them to save your life. They commit crimes, they go to jail, they get a t-shirt that says I'm a firefighter now, they get a hose, they get some fancy boots and a hat, and they're putting out fires, paying them 5 cents an hour. Hey, perhaps this is the only way we can compete with places like China in a race to the bottom for how low we can pay our workers. We don't want to pay people $80 an hour, we want to pay them 5 cents an hour. Especially civil servants, the people that are putting out fires in your places of business and the places where you live. How can we trust these people not to just run away? But strangely enough, these things are on the table in the United States And similar things are coming to Canada very soon. Okay, everyone, that's it for this edition of the Animal Politics Show. I'm Fat Cat signing off. See you next week.